Manny Stewart once described Andrew Golota, the Polish heavyweight contender from the 1990s, as a punk. And what he meant by that, because he elaborated on it, was that Golota was the kind of guy who, when the going got too tough for him in the ring, would look to try and find a way out, but a way which would give him plausible deniability against accusations of being a coward. And in most instances, that meant fouling his way out of a fight. So if you get down on your knee and say, I don't want any more, people can accuse you of being a quitter and being a coward. But if you hit a guy low continuously throughout a bout and then say, well, I'm just retaliating because the guy was headbutting me in clinches, that's the get out clause, right? That's the way you could say, no, it wasn't me quitting. It was me just retaliating. But in many instances, no, it's actually the fighter quitting. Manny Stewart also said this about other fighters. I forget every single example. He might have said it about Mike Tyson after the Holyfield rematch. I forget now, but he said it about several fighters. And certainly with Zab Judah, he's another person who I would put into that category of punk, the way that Manny Stewart described it. Zab Judah was a fantastic fighter in his day, but he did have this streak in him where when things weren't going his way in the ring, he would throw his toys out the pram in a very dramatic way and start carrying on with all these punkish antics. The best example being the Costa Zoo fight, where referee Jay Nady rightly stopped it because Zab Judah was completely gone. And Zab Judah actually physically attacked the referee. And we saw that even in the Mayweather fight, Zab Judah doing some funny stuff, starting to punk out. And there would often come those moments in a Judah fight where somebody's getting the better of him. Later on in his career, you didn't see it as often. But earlier on in his career, it was happening, well, far too often, let's just say that, where he was pulling these funny antics because someone was getting the better of him. And I've seen that myself in the gym over the years. There were certain guys who, if somebody was getting the better of them in sparring, they would want to have a bare knuckle. In one incident, a guy picked up a kosh and started waving it around and trying to attack his sparring partner and other people in the gym with a kosh, and obviously he got kicked out of the gym and what have you. So some guys are like that. They can't handle the idea of either being beat or knocked out or humiliated in front of a bunch of other people. So they take things to a ridiculous level, which is, way beyond sport, where they, want to have this plausible deniability and foul their way out of the situation, you see? And Mike Tyson against Evander Holyfield is a great example of that. I know Tyson fanatics to this day still can't handle what happened there, but that's the reality of it. Mike Tyson fouled his way out of the Holyfield rematch because he realized early on it was going to go the same way as the first fight. And Teddy Atlas, by the way, say what you like about the man, and I can be plenty critical of him myself. He predicted before that fight that Mike Tyson would do something to get himself out of the fight, as in try and foul his way out of the fight. He predicted that beforehand. I remember it well. And that's exactly what happened. And afterwards, they said to Teddy, well, how did you know? And Teddy said, because I trained him. Because I know what he's like. I know beneath all the bravado and everything that he's this, as Teddy Atlas describes him, scared little boy. And I saw that kind of behavior from him when I trained him. So anyway, there are some fighters who are like this. And I'm going to now put Montana Love in that same category, because that's what I saw in his fight against Stevie Spark. For those of you who haven't seen it, if you're a DAZN subscriber, it's on DAZN, and the highlights are on YouTube anyway if you don't want to watch the whole thing. It's a 6-round fight. So Montana Love, unbeaten fighter, southpaw, flashy, fluid, all this kind of thing, 140-pounder. Goes up against an Australian and Stevie Spark, who I've personally never watched before. And Love, I don't know what he thought of Spark going in, but I suspect he didn't really expect much. He didn't think this guy would be able to give him much work. But Steve Spark ended up dropping Montana Love in the second round, giving him a bit of a rude awakening. Love got back up, and he was outboxing Stevie Spark for long stretches throughout the fight. But Stevie Spark was getting closer and closer with his attacks, because obviously he dropped him in the second round. He was getting closer and closer. And I think Montana Love was feeling the pressure of that. Then in the sixth round, there was a clash of heads. And to me, it looked like an accidental clash of heads. There's always going to be someone that claims every single clash of heads was deliberate. But in most instances, head clashes are not deliberate. Some are blatant butts, like, let's say, Victor Ortiz against Mayweather, or even Vladimir Klitschko against Tyson Fury. I mean, that was one of the most blatant butts I've ever seen. The great sportsman, Vladimir Klitschko, look at what he tried to do to Tyson Fury. Luckily for Fury, he didn't get cut or anything from that headbutt. But yeah, that was terrible from Vladimir Klitschko. In any event, yeah, sometimes you'll see a deliberate butt or a clash of heads, which is a deliberate butt, but is cleverly disguised as an innocent clash of heads. That happens too. But in most instances, they tend to be accidents. Two guys with their heads down trying to trade on the inside, or one guy's got his head up and the other guy's got his head down, or it's two guys fighting very aggressively. And I haven't seen any evidence to suggest that this Stevie Spark clash of heads was deliberate. In any event, Montana Love ended up with a cut eye. It was a relatively bad cut, not the worst cut I've ever seen. But the doctor was called to have a look at it at the side of the ring, and Montana Love tried to quit at that point. That's what he tried to do. He was telling the doctor, I can't see. Bear in mind, when he was saying this, there was no blood running into his eye that I could see. The blood, the cut wasn't bleeding profusely at that point. And he was telling the doctor, he was looking into it, I can't really see. He didn't want to go on. He wanted, because I have to assume he felt like he was ahead on the cards, he wanted it to be called off at that point so that he could get a technical decision and move on to the next fight. But the doctor and the referee, whatever, weren't willing to stop it at that point. And so the action resumed, and Stevie Spark charged across the ring, knowing that his opponent was wounded physically with the cut, but perhaps even mentally, because maybe he realized he was trying to get himself out of the fight. And he went for the finish. And at that point, Montana Love, when they were in a clinch, grabbed Stevie Spark, charged across the ring with him, like some kind of WWE wrestling move, and flung him out of the ring. At which point the referee disqualified him. Now, Eddie Hearn, who promotes Montana Love, I'm not sure if he promotes Spark as well, but he certainly promotes Love, said that it was a terrible decision by the referee. He said this in front of the referee. I thought that was very bad form by Eddie Hearn. Look at this replay of Montana Love pushing Stevie Spark out the ring. This was no accident. This wasn't a situation where they were just tangled up and, jostling for position in the clinch and somebody ends up going over the ropes. No, Montana Love, with his left hand, pushes Stevie Spark's head down. And yeah, he doesn't pick up his leg, but you don't necessarily need to pick somebody's leg up to get them out of the ring. He pushes his head down as hard as he can out of the ring. And then when Stevie Spark's feet leave the canvas and he starts moving, Montana Love uses both gloves, you can see it clearly, to push, to make sure that Stevie Spark is pushed completely out of the ring. It was absolutely, totally deliberate. And for a fighter to do something like that, I have no issue with the referee disqualifying them. Now, could he have given him a second chance? Could he have done this? Maybe. I mean, if he had given him a second chance, it wouldn't have been the worst thing I've ever seen. But I also have no problem with the straight disqualification, because when you push a guy out the ring like this, if he hits his head, never mind the fight being over, I mean, he could seriously injure himself with a cut or concussion or even worse, fractured skull. That's what can happen if you do something like this. You can't have fighters running around thinking that doing this to an opponent is okay. Like deliberately shoving them out the ring. Like, that's not okay. Because if he can get away with it once, maybe he'll try it again. So, no, I'm, to be honest with you, glad that he got disqualified for this punk behavior that we saw here. That's my take on the fight. Montana Love against Stevie Spark. And of course, Spark got the win via disqualification in the 6th round. Montana Love said he wants to run it back. Does he really want to run it back? Maybe he does. Maybe part of him does. Maybe his pride and his ego wants to run it back. But I'm sure in the back of his mind, he also doesn't want to taste that Stevie Spark power again because he got hit and hurt on a number of occasions. It's not just the 2nd round where he got dropped. Later on in the fight, he got hurt again. And I think he felt the pressure mounting against him. He felt like this guy was going to get to him, particularly after he suffered that cut. I think he thought, nah, I don't like the way this is going. I don't want to end up losing to this guy or getting knocked out by this guy. This is going to be too embarrassing for my reputation and who I think I am and all this kind of thing. Bear in mind, this was in front of his home fans in Cleveland. Montana Love is from Cleveland. Sometimes when a guy fights in front of his home fans, there's extra pressure because everybody in the crowd knows you, you know? So, yeah, that's my take on it. Give me your take in the comment section below. I'm sure there are going to be at least a few people who take exception with my assessment here. But that's just the way I see it. I think the guy, based upon the Manny Stewart definition of the word, is a punk. Or at least he's got some punk in him. Because that's just not cricket. Do you know what I mean? The way that he was behaving in there. It's one thing to quit in a fight. And I've long said that I don't have an issue with fighters quitting. When I say I don't have an issue, I've never been in a position like, let's say, Kell Brook or Daniel Dubois or any of these other guys who have been in tough fights where they've fought their heart out and they've got some injury, like whatever, an injured eye or whatever, and they decide to take a knee and not continue. Well, I've never been in that position. I can sit here and tell you that, yeah, I'd carry on. But until you've been in that position, you don't know. You know what I mean? Everybody can have the bravado, but until it happens to you, you don't know. So it's no use me having a go at fighters who quit in situations like that. But with Montana Love, it's not just about the fact that he tried to quit. No, that's one thing. It's about the fact that he punked out. He started throwing his toys out the pram and carrying them with all kind of ridiculous antics because he felt like the end was nigh. Again, very Zab Judah-like, what I saw there. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below.